This is Dateline News and Conversation. Tonight, we have 5, maybe 6 friends of ours from, well, they're all Americans, but they're not all coming to us tonight from the United States. But I'm going to ask them, and the topic is going to be, hang on. I hope we're still here.
Yep.
Are we still here?
Yes.
All right, there's Tony. Tony's back.
Good.
All right.
Good.
The topic tonight is going to be the Israeli genocide in Gaza, Palestine. I know all of my guests tonight have very strong and informed positions on what is happening in Palestine. It's been going on since October 7th of last year. I'm going to ask each of them on their comments, their views about the genocide that's going on in Israel with the support of the United States. I'm going to go first to my friend, dear friend, longtime activist in Brunswick, Maine, Rosie Paul. Rosie, from where you're sitting, and I know you've been involved in protests against this genocide in Palestine. What are your thoughts?
Well, the first word, oh, that was funny. Okay. The first word that comes to mind for me is frustration. We do everything we can think of to protest, to make connections with others. Bruce and Mary Beth, Bruce and Lisa Savage really have organized a series of statewide rallies, one a month in a different part of the state, and have drawn interesting crowds of people from various political parties, including some you've never heard of. Young people, a lot. We're making connections here in Brunswick with the Bowdoin students and their powerful cry against the genocide. The college, of course, says, yes, you can hold a protest, but you can't have any photographs or any, media coverage at all. So the college won't be connected with this horror show. Anyway, it's so enormously frustrating. I think that Senator King, whom we visit frequently, either at his office or on his front porch, though he is generally not there, and sometimes the students hold paper airplanes and with long messages written on them and fly them into his yard. Senator King and Senator Collins from another part of the state, Representative Pingree from our district, our governor, all gathered the press together yesterday in York County to announce that York County Community College would now be having in their curriculum courses that showed them the value of the newly made alliance called something very much like this. It might not be quite right. The Maine Defense Industry Alliance, which pulls together all of the many businesses in Maine that make parts or wholes of weapons of mass destruction. And many of them are being used in Gaza as we speak. So frustration is why that's why that sound comes to my mind. What are we not thinking of that we could be doing to get Mr. King to see another way? I can't imagine that there is such a thing, but I think we're not thinking of it yet. So obviously, we think that it's a terrible, terrible war that's going on. I would say, Regis, you said it's supported by the United States, but I think it's more than supported. I think it's encouraged wildly by the United States. And that is not okay. anybody's book, but I think they have their audience. I think that the corporate narrative is so easily accepted by certainly Democrats and many independents, I'm sure. Though the poll numbers may show that there are a great many more people who object to the genocide in the United States than who allow it, then you look at a different poll and it's not the same numbers. So I don't know what to say about that. And maybe it's somebody else's turn. Thank you for listening to all that.
Well, thank you, Rosie. I really, from what I can see, there seems to be many people across the United States who are rising up in protests against the genocide in Israel and America's support for the ongoing genocide in Israel.
But not enough. Not enough yet.
But not enough. But and maybe it's too little too late. I don't know. I'm going to go now to my dear friend, Riva Enteen. She's a former attorney. She's an expat. She's currently in Malawi, East Africa. Riva, what are your thoughts on this Israeli genocide on the Palestinian people and the involvement of the United States of America?
Okay, it's good to be with you. And Regis, hopefully it's not too little too late. That just sort of like, I felt it in my heart, right? And Rosie, I mean, there's frustration and outrage, right? One little outrage. Did you say people can't even take signs at protests anymore? There's ways that we don't even see how much ground we've lost. Anyway, I took a few notes in preparation for this really honorable thing to participate in. I found a Desmond Tutu quote: "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality."
Beautiful.
And I love the humor to it. Anyway, so one of my big critiques is, does the UN have a raison d'etre? It's like, you would think it would facilitate peaceful resolution of disputes. It's not enforceable. And I found these two headlines in Sputnik yesterday, and it's the difference in verb and what the impact is. So one headline was, "Japan urges Israel to obey international law." And the other one was, "Colombia suspends arms purchases from Israel after the Gaza aid incident." And we're so used to urge and condemn and all these toothless statements. And why don't more countries suspend arm like, we just have to be more proactive. Rosie, I really relate to your frustration, needless to say. Oh, yeah. So one thing that we can think of for this past week, if I'm correct, it's more or less week and a half. The same week that Aaron Bushnell did a self-immolation in front of the Israeli embassy is the same week that Biden was seen eating an ice cream cone and very cavalierly saying, well, yeah, I mean, maybe by Monday there'll be a ceasefire. That ice cream cone, I can't get it out of my head. And I was thinking, why should I be embarrassed? Needless to say, I didn't vote for him, but we are the laughing stock and a dangerous laughing stock of the world. That goes without saying. Okay, Regis, let me just finish up here. In terms of your really good question about Israel's right to exist, I would recommend that people, I just got this today and crammed it, the first presentation at the World Court about the South Africa petition was by this guy, Ralph Wild, for the League of Arab States. One of the things he said, let me just read these two sentences and then I'll be done, is illegal force does not become lawful in response to resistance to it. Otherwise, an illegal use of force would be rendered lawful because those subject to it violently resisted. circular logic with a perverse outcome. So I highly recommend this guy. He totally challenges Israel's right to exist under international law. And, maybe we could each share a word. So Rosie, it's frustration. I'll add outrage. And then I guess the last thing, this was on Crossfire, I'm sorry, that the words genocide, that's becoming, people don't react to it. It's neutral. And they were saying maybe we should say Gaza Holocaust because people react to that word. And it's something to think about. Thank you, Regis. It's an honor.
Thanks, Riva. You didn't mention it, but you are a Jew by birth. And if you want to comment on that later, you're perfectly free to do that. But I just wanted to make that clear that not all Jews are in favor of this genocide on Palestinians. They're all Semitic. And for a long time, they all lived in peace and harmony with one another. There's another faction that's involved and has overtaken the state of Israel. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I want to go to my good friend now, Richard Dihlman. He's a U.S. expat. He's married to a Russian. He was living in Siberia for a long time, but came to his senses and decided to come to Malta in particular. And I think he's found heaven. Rich, take it away.
Thank you. What's the question is, friends of Israel or friends of Zionism? And I'm a friend of Jews, but I'm not a friend of Zionism myself. If you're a friend of Zionism, you're a friend of genocide. Or if you're a friend of Zionism, you're a friend for bombing schools and hospitals, killing women and children. This thing is just beyond evil. This is inhuman, and it's just the whole world is just tired of it. Now, the situation is just to a point that even the Jewish people were, prior to this October 7th, there was about 500,000 or more people weekly in the streets going after Netanyahu, wanting him out of there. And this is Zionism. People in Israel have had it with that, I believe. So what happened really happened there. I just saw a thing on Haaretz said that out of the 1,700 people that were murdered from the Hamas attack, supposed thing from Hamas, which they flew over, the barbed wire and that stuff, 1,139 was killed by friendly fire. And, that's not to say anything about the other 600 that the Hamas people did kill. But, this whole situation is Netanyahu at the time was in deep trouble, real deep trouble. They wanted him out of there. And right now, out of chaos comes control. That's what I see happening over there. It's just totally disgusting, for the United States to be giving them 1,000-pound bombs and JDAMs and having them going in there and just bombing civilians, women and children. How can this even exist in this year 2024? It's beyond comprehension. It's horrendous. And the situation is they're evil. The same evil that's in Israel is in the United States. It's a Zionist stranglehold they have on the United States government, and they have for a long time. There's never been a non-Zionist president that I know of in Israel. Maybe I'm wrong. So it's not what everybody thinks it is. It's really Rothschild Zionism, Israel state. It's just an enclave of this cabal. that's the way I see it. Sorry, but and the people in Israel they better start. They were speaking up. I don't know how they feel there, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah. Rich, I want to thank you for that. I want everybody to know that you are partially Jewish blood.
Yes, my grandmother, my mother's mother, my grandmother, she spoke it. She didn't even speak English very well. She spoke Austrian, German, and Yiddish. She really spoke mostly Yiddish. So yeah, I'm 50% Ashkenazi. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Rich. I want to go out to now another really good friend, Elizabeth Murray, out on the West Coast. As I mentioned, she's a former CIA analyst, a member of Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. Elizabeth, turn your microphone on now and join us. What are your thoughts? And I know it is very dear and close to your heart what's going on in Palestine today. Elizabeth, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Regis. First of all, I should mention that I lived in the Middle East for several years and visited Gaza on a number of occasions, and I was actually part of the 2018 Gaza Freedom Flotilla. So a lot of this is very personal to me. I've walked on the shores of Gaza and chatted with fishermen, and I was there during the hopeful years of the 1990s when Rabin had not yet been assassinated and it looked like peace might actually break out. So, all of this is really, really horrific. And, it harks back to the 1948 Nakba. And it's interesting to me, if you look back in history, it was March 10th, 1948, when the Zionist leaders, people in the Haganah and such, were putting the finishing touches on their ethnic cleansing plan for Palestine, and 6 months after that, in 1948, in March, they had expelled 800,000 Palestinians. So I'm looking at March 10th coming up, and I'm wondering, are they going to start their push in Rafah then? And I think everybody should also be aware that back on February 23rd, when the intelligence chiefs of, the CIA, the Mossad, and the intel leaders in Egypt and Qatar met in Paris for their little summit, Hamas, of course, no representatives from there. These were not really any kind of peace talks or even ceasefire talks. I'm totally convinced that was a psyop. What they really talked about, these intelligence chiefs, again, no diplomats, is the logistical issues. You see a concentration camp being built on the Rafah border in Egypt. Egypt has just been approved for a $10 billion loan package, so they're being handsomely compensated for this. Egypt wants in on the offshore gas, as do many other countries in the region that are eagerly rubbing their hands. You've seen is Keller Williams, an international real estate company, advertising already for condominiums, waterfront condominiums on the Gaza coast. They're moving in. They already have their plans. Everyone is protesting. The International Court of Justice has ruled plausible genocide. The United States seems not to recognize the legitimacy of international law when it comes to Israel. And as you can see, they are putting more and more pressure on the people of Gaza. We've seen this massacre of people trying to get flour to survive. They want to put them into a state of extreme anxiety so that when they blast open the wall in Egypt, probably they'll do a false flag and say that Hamas did it so that they won't be held culpable. they want to make sure that people voluntarily, Palestinians voluntarily, go into Egypt so they can just wash their hands. So unfortunately, we are seeing the intelligence agencies of the captured countries, if you will, they're planning for an exodus. They're planning for, I'm sorry, not an exodus, but they're planning for a final solution. And it's, we can talk about this more, but there seems to be very little that the public or that international law can do to stop this. It looks like it will happen.
Elizabeth, I want to thank you very much. Your insight as a former CIA analyst and someone who has been intimately connected with what's going on in the Middle East for many, many years is extremely valuable. We're going to want to hear more from you about that. I want to go to Chiang Mai, Thailand now, and my dear friend, the bumbling Buddhist, as he is known, Eric Arno. Eric, your thoughts on the genocide that's being committed in Palestine, the involvement of the United States government in supporting and funding that. Eric, how do you see it from when you are in Thailand?
Well, I see this as a part of a continuum, a horror continuum. We have to face the fact that the United States itself was based on genocide. The Holocaust, the German Holocaust, was inspired by the Americans. The Germans said, "What are you criticizing us for? You did the same thing to the Indians, and look at how you treat the African Americans, the blacks. So what's your problem?" And then Israel is created to be the U.S.'s aircraft carrier in the Middle East in order to control all the Arab countries and control their oil. They've got you have to remember that after World War II or after World War I, the Arab countries had the idea that they were going to become democracies. And there's been a strong, leftist sentiment in those countries for years. And all of those leftist socialist sentiments have been crushed. And so who is in charge? You've got a bunch of puppets, basically. I didn't realize, as Elizabeth just mentioned, that Egypt just got this $10 million loan. They insisted they wouldn't accept any loan. This was a no deal. There was no way they were going to allow Palestinians to enter into the desert, the Sinai desert, which is just completely outrageous. But here we are. And I also want to point out the fact that I was just talking with somebody recently from Ukraine, and she's a Soviet woman from Ukraine. And what I'm hearing, and another Russian guy that I've been talking with, told me that the Israelis were training the Ukraine military. So you've got this fascist consciousness, which has been pervasive for the last 300 to 400 years in the West. It's just infected the rest of the world, and that's what we're facing. So there's just a really, as I say, this is a very, very deeply rooted psychological disease that we're facing. And I want to mention also that I'm 100% Ashkenazi. All four of my grandparents came from the former Russian Empire. They're all Jewish refugees from the Russian Empire, either before or just after the Russian Revolution. So, what are we going to do about it? All we can do is at least give each other support, which is a good thing, a good reason why we're here on this stream. I was just talking with my Ukrainian friend, and we talked for 4 hours yesterday or on Thursday, and she was telling me how much she loved the Soviet Union and it was the happiest time of her life. and she's leaving. She's going back to Ukraine. She's got to take care of her mother, who is stuck in Dnipropetrovsk. So the point being that we have to support each other first of all, and then from there, try and spread the word about what's going on. I'll mention that I am anxious about posting stuff on Facebook because I'd rather not get just kicked off. I know how difficult it can be to get back on, and I have other reasons to be on Facebook. But I just posted a video by Bernie Sanders, who falls into that camp of, oh, this is a really terrible thing and this is awful and so on and so forth. I don't know how strongly he's come out to say, just stop sending the money. No more threats. No more please don't. Just stop sending the money. That was how we stopped the Vietnam War, when the Congress finally said they finally had enough pressure on them to just stop sending the money. That's how the war finally ended. That's, of course, what has to happen both with Ukraine war as well as with Gaza and the incipient war that's going to happen in Taiwan, which they're also planning. So these are all part of a peace. It's U.S. and Western hegemony, and these people have a extremely psychopathic mentality, and they've got to be stopped. And somehow we have groups like this one talking about it, and we brainstorm and figure out how to deal with it.
Thank you, Eric, from Chiang Mai, Thailand. Always love to hear your insight with your Buddhist foundation. Eric was a Buddhist monk for a number of years, and he really brings to the discussion a very interesting perspective. Always appreciated, Eric. I know it's late in the morning. It's probably now close to, 1:30, I guess, or
no, it's 12:30. Yeah, 12:30.
So hang in there with a little bit more if you can, and just take a nap in the afternoon, Eric. Take a nap, and you can join us, because I really value your insight and your opinion. We're going to go back out to the West Coast.
I just want to say one thing is that the two of my good friends here in Chiang Mai that I can actually talk with about this stuff, they're both leaving, for at least 2 months. And so that's one of the reasons why I go onto this stream, because I need to talk with some people who are sane.
Yeah. And this is why I love to do these shows with you folks and with others, because I really think it is very important that we connect with each other and we support each other, and we continue to chip away at the official narrative. I love the analogy, and this is what we're trying to do. It's like the dandelion or the weed that pops up through the asphalt. It's one little dandelion or one little weed that pops up and is glowing brightly and bending towards the sun. And so, again, I have to thank all of you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. We're going to go back out to San Francisco. Tony Long, who's longing to come to Russia. Tony, welcome to the show. Your thoughts on the genocide that's continuing and the U.S. involvement in this genocide in Palestine. Take it away, Tony.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. The trouble with being the last guy on these streams is that all of my thunder's been stolen, particularly by Elizabeth and Eric. So I won't be saying much. I'll get Eric off to bed real quick here. I was going to talk about history, but Elizabeth covered it way better than I could have done. The only thing I'm going to say is how angry I am at the United States. I mean, I'm pissed at Israel, but I've been pissed at Israel for years. well, I've been pissed at the United States for years too, actually. That was my point. I've pretty much been pissed at our country since the end of World War II. But this one hurts a little bit more because it is a genocide. By any definition, this is a genocide. And we're not just complicit, we're actively involved. And that, I think, is the most disgusting thing of all. And as Eric said, you know, turn off the money, it stops. But we're not going to do that. So we are as guilty as the Israelis are for what's happening in Gaza right now. And, you know, I'd like to think that protesting makes a difference. I mean, I went to protest during the Vietnam War, and I think in the end they did help. I'm not sure if it's the same country here in the United States anymore. I think we've been desensitized, from the Reagan years onward, at least, to being outraged at things like that. So, go ahead and protest. I think it's great. I've been to a couple of rallies here in the city in San Francisco. I was on Market Street during a first Palestinian rally. It was pretty impressive to see. I'm not sure how effective they are. I tend to be a pessimist anyway, and I think that where we're headed now generally is nowhere good, and the United States is leading the train. I look at most of the things going on in the world, not just Gaza, not just Ukraine, but around the world. Look at what we did in Yemen, and look at what we've done in a bunch of other places, overtly, covertly. The United States is at the bottom of almost every single thing. And we are a dangerous, aggressive country, and I'm ashamed to be an American. I've been ashamed to be an American for a long time, but I'm kind of at the end of my tether now. That's really all I have to say. I mean, I'm pissed, and I don't see any way out. That's it. Wish I could be more.
Thanks, Tony.
I do want to
think
cover Russia quick. Yeah.
I really appreciate your comments. I think a lot of us feel that way. The thing that I would like to continue to underscore, to repeat, I do not believe that the forces behind what's happening today are Washington, D.C., the present administration. I believe that there are a very small handful of globalist interests that are controlling what is happening across the world today. I'm absolutely convinced of that. I don't want to get into that tonight, but I would like to ask each of you now. Israel became a state with the Balfour Declaration in 1947. There are many people today who believe that that was illegal, it was misguided, and it was wrong. And for all of these years, from 1947 to the present day, the people in Palestine have been opposed to this. Many of us who understood how this evolved today feel that Israel is an illegal entity that has taken over Palestinian land. I'd like your thoughts and how you feel about the state of Israel. I don't want to get into the one state or two state solution, but just in terms of the Balfour Declarations, do you feel this was right, it was just, and it was legal? I'm going to go back to my friend, the bumbling Buddhist in Thailand, because it's very late there and he may have to go to bed. Eric, your thoughts? Your microphone.
Okay. virulent, perfidious, disgusting groups of people, the people who are running that country, that there's been for centuries. During World War I, they went to the Arabs and they said, you know, if you unite against the Ottoman Empire, we'll grant you democracy. And as soon as the war is over, the British, who have no jurisdiction whatever in that area, do this Balfour Declaration, which is between Lord Rothschild, the biggest banker in the world probably. And by the way, I think the main street in Tel Aviv is Rothschild Avenue or something like that. So the whole thing it's based on it's a farce. And as soon as the Zionists got control of the situation, and by the way, there was significant emphasis on getting the Jews out of Europe because they're not crazy about the Jews anyway. So they said, sure, send them off to Palestine, let them mess with the Arabs, and that way we can get control of the oil and it'll all be wonderful for us. We get rid of the Jews and then they can be our agents. So the whole thing is completely illegal and totally unethical. There's no basis for it. And it's never going to work because these people, the Israelis, and most of the Israeli public, by the way, are completely online with this thing. It's only some of the older Israelis who have some kind of historical consciousness and some kind of values that understand that what's going on is wrong, but most of them support it. So they're living in this bubble. They're basically, what they've done is they've created a mental ghetto for themselves. They've recreated a mental ghetto for themselves. They're surrounded by their enemies. They love to have their enemies because that gives them the sense of identity for themselves. It's a complete psychological derangement, and it can't end well. That's enough I'll say on that.
Okay, thank you, Eric, for that. I want to go to Elizabeth now. Elizabeth, you've been on the CIA desk for many years. You spent your life there. What are your thoughts on the Balfour Declaration, 1947, the creation of Israel as a state?
Okay, thank you, Regis. I just wanted to thank Eric for his comments because it reminded me of a quote from Chris Hedges, which is, "War is a force that gives us meaning." And that seems to apply in Israel, where I think, upwards of 70% of the public actually believes that Israel is not doing enough to push the people out of Gaza, that they should bomb more and starve the people and all that. So I totally agree with everything he says. But as to your question, Regis, I think that Britain, who is Britain to take a country away from the Palestinians and give it to Israel? Totally illegitimate. Now, when people talk about Israel needs to be dismantled, I really think it depends on, what kind of future do the people in Israel want? I mean, we should all remember that, prior to 1948, Jews, Muslims, and Christians lived in Palestine peacefully next to each other. There was not a problem. I could see a one-state solution along the lines of what Nico Peled advocates, where there could be a state of Palestine, and those former Israelis who want to live in peace and harmony can stay there, and the rest of them can go back to their countries of origin, wherever, Poland or parts of Central Europe or Ukraine. I don't really see, I think, as Eric said, it's hard to envision, especially after this genocide, a viable future. And I think many Israelis probably agree with that. I mean, I think upwards of 500,000 have left Israel since October the 7th, 2023, to Europe and other destinations, and one wonders whether any of them want to come back. Who's going to be left in Israel? Just the fanatic pro-genocidaires that think all of this is hunky-dory and that have these dreams of Yeretz Yisrael, greater Israel. Let's keep in mind also that right now Israel is literally at war with bombing daily Lebanon and Syria. They are trying to drag the United States into a greater war. But no, all of this underscores the illegitimacy of Israel, and I think people are aware of it now. I mean, especially the way that the government has not chosen the path of peaceful coexistence. They've chosen apartheid. We've seen how South Africa was dismantled as an apartheid state relatively non-violently. It can be done.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Always appreciated. Very insightful. I'm not going to leave Tony long to the last one this time around. So, Tony, your thoughts. The Balfour Declaration, 1947, the legitimacy of Israel as a country.
Well,
Take it away.
Israel, I think, was based on a lie. A land without people for a people without a land, that simply wasn't true. There were hundreds of thousands of people there. Apparently, they weren't considered people. And given the ethnic cleansing that went on immediately, obviously they weren't considered people, which is unfortunate. I would say I read a book once, and I can't remember the author. He was an Israeli historian, and I can't remember the title of the book either. So that this is going to be totally unhelpful. But his premise was that the Palestinians are actually the direct descendants of the Jews of the Bible. And he argued that when back then in those days, when the area became Islamic, the Jews were given a choice. They could stay and convert to Islam, or they could leave. A lot of them chose to stay and converted to Islam, and they're now the descendants of today's, or the ancestors of today's Palestinians. So in a weird way, you've got Israel beating up on their own people. So I think the whole thing is illegitimate. I think Israel was a misbegotten country in the first place. It never should have been constituted the way it was in that part of the world. This is my own opinion, and I think it's unfortunate, and that's pretty much my thoughts on that. I mean, you always have to be careful because, you run the risk, if you say something like this, you run the risk of being smeared as an anti-Semite, and I'm certainly not that. And, but I think it's true. And I sometimes you just have to confront these truths. They're not pleasant, but when you consider what's going on now, what can you do? I mean, like I say, I'm a pessimist.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. I think what I am so enjoying about this discussion is we are hearing voices of ordinary Americans. Each of you is an ordinary American with a particular point of view in a particular part of the country and a particular part of the world. And I'm really happy to be able to share your views, because I think all too often, all we're hearing from are the people who dominate both the mainstream and the non-mainstream alternative media. Not enough people, regular, ordinary people, are being heard. And I am, for one, and very happy to be able to be part of these kinds of discussions. I want to go to Rosie Paul now, back in Brunswick, Maine. Rosie, your thoughts on the legitimacy of Israel as a country?
I think it's certainly true what others have said about the origins in the Balfour Declaration, that it's illegal and should never have happened. But I don't think we're going to gain much ground from taking that point as a way of stopping what's going on now. So I would correct something that I'm not sure who said, I think Elizabeth maybe, that Israel wants a wider war. I'm pretty sure the United States is equally in that boat. Whether they are pushing the boat, I don't know. But certainly both Israel and the United States are pushing for a wider war. They may be the most psychotic of all the leaders in the world. And I like to think, could we be using our energy toward the countries that are more neutral, should we say, or maybe even the NATO countries, good Lord, at urging them to make a list, for heaven's sake, of the pros and cons of sticking with America as hegemon or breaking loose from America and going to their local governments, parliaments, and whatever, to say, well, now who are we and what do we want to do in the world and what will happen to our economy if we break from the United States, and really begin to think about some alternative to this madness that is so deeply sick. I think we've all used the word psychotic, and I don't think it's inaccurate for the kind of leadership that so many countries are having. Anyway, did that answer anything that you wanted me to say? I don't think we can cancel the state of Israel, even though maybe it should be canceled. And certainly the United States was founded not with the same kind of autonomy from another nation saying, why don't you go and start a new country, because we actually left the British Isles and so forth in a very different way. But then when we got there, we did our own genocide and are continuing with that. We are just awful. I must say, I was thinking maybe I'd move to South Africa. I only say that because they seem to have had a little courage recently in bringing that case to the International Criminal Court. So I'm probably not leaving. I'm kind of stuck here with so much entanglement that I'm probably not going to pack my bags today. But one does want to leave if one can't do anything to wake people up to their own sorrows. I think the people who are sick for a reason, and they should have some help instead of leading us all to destruction. Thanks. And yes, Regis, it's great to talk with people. I love each one of these fellow panelists. Thanks so much for inviting us.
Wow. There is so much richness and depth from engaging in these dialogues, these conversations with all of you, my friends. It is, on the one hand, very affirming. On the other hand, it really, I think, makes me and all of us feel that we're not alone, that we do have friends and comrades and colleagues who are trying to do whatever we can to reverse the trends that we see happening in our world today. And in my opinion, these trends are all doing what none of us wants, and that is to dehumanize us, to deprive us of our basic humanity, our basic human values, and our care for each other and the planet. Now, before we finish, I've got to go back to my two really good friends. First of all, Riva Enteen in Eastern Africa. Riva, I know you've been waiting, and you've been waiting patiently. What are your thoughts on the legitimacy of Israel as a state, and where do we go from here? Turn your microphone on.
Oh dear. There we go. You hear me? Cool. Well, just real quick, and I'm not a historian like a lot of you people, but the Balfour Declaration in 1917 showed that Israel was not created to protect the Jews after the Holocaust. And it's just, most people believe that, that the Jews needed a place to go after the Holocaust, and that's why it happened. But it was the plan all along. And like somebody said, Europe didn't really want the Jews anyway, so let's display, yeah. So the Balfour Declaration is significant to show that Israel was not created to, quote unquote, protect the Jews. Rosie, the wider war, another way of saying that is World War or World War III. And more people are beginning to, that's right, Regis, your interview with Dean the other day, he said it like, but again, that people are not reacting to the concept of brink of World War III, and they're not reacting to the concept of the word genocide. Tony, I agree with you. It's different than it was during Vietnam, and I think people are brain dead. Just real last, I'll end with what it was for me as a Jew. So I was raised by secular Jewish socialist parents, and we agreed on everything but Zionism. And they believed that all Arabs wanted to wipe all the Jews into the sea. The Arabs, the Palestinians didn't have a right to the land because they were nomadic anyway. And I can't remember the third biggie, but it runs deep. It runs deep. So we really couldn't talk about it. And I don't know where they would be if they were alive today. But my son, frankly, whoever said they wonder about the polls, I'm hoping that the polls are accurate, that 2/3 of Americans support a permanent ceasefire. And unfortunately, my son is one of the third who thinks anything Israel has to do is necessary. And then just one last thing in terms of us Ashkenazi Jews. So yeah, all four of my grandparents had to escape from Russia because of the pogroms. So I sort of get that I'm here because Jews sometimes had to escape. But well, I'll just end with not in my name. And I've said for a while before October 7th that never again cannot just mean no gas ovens. And I think we say never again can't mean yellow stars and boxcars and gas ovens. It means genocide. And I agree with the analysis that I don't think Israel has a right to exist as a legal state. And I recommend that guy's article that I referred to. Thank you. Ralph Wild. Wild. I highly recommend Ralph Wild. Yep.
For everybody that's watching and all of our comrades here, our colleagues on this video, Riva is on her way to Russia and the Crimea for an extended period of time, and we cannot wait for your arrival, Riva.
Thank you.
Now, I've got to go to my friend, last but certainly not least, Richard Dihlman, right here in Yalta in the Crimea. Richard, your final thoughts.
Let's see, on the Balfour. Well, it's about as phony as, what's his name there? Netanyahu from Poland. Or Rothschild himself, a Bauer. Was he an Ashkenazi or Khazar? What's the difference? What does it matter? They're really not Semitic. Or have very little bit Semitic, you know. Helen Thomas, I don't know if you remember her. She used to be a White House correspondent, and on Obama's last tenure, his last 4 years, she kind of was asking Obama something about Israel and the nuclear weapons. And of course, Obama just kind of pushed that off the side. But right after that press conference, a rabbi come up and he had a microphone in Helen's face, and he asked Helen, you know, what are you talking about? And she was telling, you know, really, they're from, you know, Poland. They're from, you know, Europe. Well, they just get out of there and go back to where they come from. And, you know, the rabbi thought he was real cool and everything. He got the 93-year-old lady fired. But what happened was Helen opening up the whole big can of worms, and people started really getting into what Khazarians are and what Ashkenazis are, and are they really Semitic? And boy, oh boy, he got the old lady fired, but God bless her, because she just really opened the whole gates up to the phoniness of the Zionism. You know, it's evil. There's just no two ways about it. These people are freaking evil to the point that it's just almost hard to imagine how evil they are. You know, I mean, they do more. They do human harvesting, you know, in Israel. That's a fact. They'll just take a, 25-year-old guy and arrest him and take his organs. That's absolute fact. That's no conspiracy thing. These are facts. So the way these people have been treated for 75 years and stuff is, if anything happens, of course Israel's going to win this, and the United States there with their aircraft carriers and all this, but people should shun these inhuman people. They want to act like that, okay, because they got nuclear bombs and stuff, but don't buy anything that they sell, and turn your back on these people. And if the Jews want to back them, turn your back on them too. Because this is disgusting. That's all I got to really say. It's just to a point that, it's just beyond control. If we, in the United States, is so taken over by these people, the AIPAC and the money and the central bank control, it all comes back to that. And where does that come from? City of London, Basel, Switzerland, Vatican. We know where it is. United States power out of the Pentagon, backing this evil up. But it's straight in evil, and what you're looking at is happening to the Palestinians is just they've taken off their gloves and they've shown themselves from 9/11, and now it's all out in the open. If people don't see this satanic evil, then they'll never see it. I see it, and I don't like it. And I'll be damned if I'll buy anything that's made in Israel. Nothing. That's the least I can do. And I'll tell you, I expose it as much as I can. I expose it on the internet and on social media as much as I can. That's the least I can do. So.
Well,
sorry.
Thank you, Rich.
I wanted to ask Elizabeth though. When she was in that flotilla, was she with Ken O'Keefe and Cynthia McKinnon? Was it that one?
No, I think that was the previous one. Neither of those people were on the ship, but I have tremendous respect for both of them. I know who they both are.
When you said that, it just jumped out at me about Ken O'Keefe, and thank you. I didn't know.
Well, I want to thank all of you. Richard ended on a note that I think is very important. I, and this is my personal opinion, believe that what we are seeing in the world today is evil. I don't know how else that I can personally describe the horror, the killing, the massacre, not only what's going on in Palestine today, but it's been going on for decades, for eons. I've often wondered, as my friend Dr. Helen Callicott said at the end of my film, 30 Seconds to Midnight, are we an evolutionary aberration designed in an evolutionary sense, not to survive. My friends, and those of you who are watching this show tonight, we have to ask ourselves, are we that evolutionary aberration? Humankind today possesses the weapons, nuclear weapons, that can destroy all life on the planet. How else can this be described as evil? I personally have no other answer. I want to thank all of you, Rosie, Riva, Rich, Tony, Eric, and Elizabeth, for joining me tonight. I hope and I know that you'll join me again very soon as we continue to look at what is happening to us in our world, what is happening to people all over this planet, and also to try to determine who and what is behind it. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. We'll see you again soon.
Where's the camera? Can't get my hand in it. There it is.